And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection, I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Found on the Government of Canada's website under the Policy and Guidance, community knowledge can be defined as knowledge held by individuals or shared by a community, which is built up over time through the direct use or interaction with a resource or environment, natural or social. This makes community knowledge context specific and unique. On today's Open Connection, we hear from co-executive directors of Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition.
I picked up on a general sense that community members were just not aware of a clear path forward on what has actually taken place so far in connection to the PIGT pipeline project or connected Sealism's terminal. Some community members were still not even aware of really that there is a separation between the project and connected ownerships, and just a strong general sense of the unknown that I think causes fear and anger sometimes, which I must say it was very calm, and people were really thankful to receive information, and so that felt really good.
Well, I think the province has been so tight-lipped and refuses to engage community members. So we did hear from a number of community members last night that had written to ministers, written to their elected representatives, and just no response. And that's on track with what we experienced with Coastal GasLink. So we were part of a citizens monitoring group because people weren't able to get in and actually inspect the construction of that pipeline unless they wanted to be arrested. Not even fisheries officers from the Wet'suwet'en technical teams. And without our own regulatory agencies going in and inspecting for compliance and enforcement issues, a lot of things went unchecked. And things that were known to be out of compliance just weren't dealt with. So I think people are justifiably angry, and their fear is also justifiable. We witnessed what happened with Coastal GasLink. And what we learned is that laws and permit conditions don't actually matter. They don't really impact the project, at least not from the perspective of them wanting to abide by those conditions. They just didn't. They had some pretty chronic and systemic issues, and government was really confused about which agency, ministry, federal, provincial had jurisdiction to deal with it. And as a result, so many infractions went undealt with. So people last night, they saw what happened with Coastal GasLink. They know that those issues haven't been remedied. So people were really upset. And when they voice their concerns through these public processes, or when they get notification letters that work is going to be starting or that survey crews will be in the area, it's a bit alarming because there is well over a decade of questions, concerns that were submitted to these public processes, and they have all gone entirely unanswered. At least not answers to the concerns that were raised. It's more along the lines of, we'll endeavor to answer your questions and get back to you, but that doesn't happen. The few times it did happen, we got contradictory and misleading, incorrect information from both the ministry, the BC Energy Regulator, and the BC Environmental Assessment Office. So something's going on. The left hand in government isn't talking to the right hand. And unfortunately, it's the communities who are bearing the brunt of that, and they're rightfully upset, confused, and angry by all this. This isn't, I think, what a democratic province should look like.
This kind of like par for course when the government's dealing with First Nations.
Also, I'm reminded that in the decision-making process when it comes to provincial and federal government and the way they do conduct business, at best, we're being told that that these decisions are based on science. It's probably important to mention that in that instance, we're talking about Western science. Science, in definition, is to study a subject for a prolonged amount of time. If we're applying this to Western science for this region, it might be between 150, or if we're looking down south, maybe 450 years. If we compare that to indigenous science and place-based ideology and power, that's not even a blink of an eye compared to tens of thousands of years that indigenous people and title holders have occupied these spaces here. So why are we, or why is the province and the federal government so hesitant to apply this wealth of knowledge when it comes to decision making? In my opinion, these have to be informed decisions, and they have to be based on science. That cannot rely on Western science only.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. An Indigenous lens refers to a perspective or framework that centers Indigenous knowledge, experiences, and worldviews when analyzing or addressing issues. It emphasizes the interconnectedness of social, environmental, and cultural factors, promoting holistic approaches and collaborative solutions. Let us rejoin the conversation with Jesse.
There was a strong sense of community not putting faith into the decision-making process. I've heard several people speak of a abuse of process when it comes to how decisions are being made currently or in the past. And I myself picked up a little bit on the federal rhetoric that's also being put out by our government, and there was inadmissibly some punchlines talking about economic independence over our neighbors in the U.S. And Prime Minister Carney had used some of that in his elbows up campaign. But punching economic mega projects through these lands against the will of title holders, Indigenous people, non-Indigenous people that live and call these places home for the benefit of foreign ownership doesn't seem to align with that.
Yeah, the presenters last night, one of them was Kai, and he kind of mentioned some things that kind of scared you a bit. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, Jesse and I were just there in attendance, like all the rest of the community members. You know, my family has 6 generations in the Kispiox Valley. Jesse's ancestral line goes back several thousand years. But what was really interesting is, you know, we keep hearing that these projects are all about national interest, public interest, elbows up. We gotta deal with these Trump tariffs and help secure Canada's economic future. Well, here's what our data has found. This is a process or project that is socializing the costs while privatizing the profits. The vast majority of investment is coming from taxpayers. It's a bit mind-blowing, but you know, these projects, they have to meet climate emissions, or at least that was how people were coerced in thinking that these might be good. Oh, it's going to clean up the climate. LNG or natural gas is the cleanest burning fossil fuel. It is, but the extraction, liquefaction, piping process makes it dirtier or as dirty as coal. So it's not actually going to clean climate. It's going to make it worse. It's like pouring gas on the climate fire and saying we're doing climate action, which is bullshit. The other piece is that they need a lot of public infrastructure in order to make these projects happen. So we built Site C Dam as a province. 100% of Site C Dam will be consumed by one LNG project. That's either LNG Canada Phase 1 or it's going to be Sealisms. But right now, I think with the projects that the province is approving, we need 34 Site C's worth of power. We don't have the power. So now the province has said, well, you know what? Maybe we don't need to worry about carbon emissions. Maybe we just scrap that and we say somewhere in the future, we hope to get them off of burning their own gas. They're going to burn 15% of the gas that comes to the terminal to power the terminal. Those are huge emissions, and that has huge human health impacts. So that's now an added cost to our health infrastructure. All these doctors across Canada have been raising the alarm, saying we are going to pay for these projects twice. Once with our own health, especially the health of pregnant women and babies. Higher rates of infant mortality, heart disease, asthma. We now know, like, so many laws have changed. Some laws have made things that were previously illegal for this industry. They're now legal in order to make sure that this industry can happen. And then other laws have changed, but it hasn't impacted this industry. Things like we have a new environmental assessment process because our old one was so antiquated that they needed to update it, but it didn't apply to this project. We now have DRIPA, the Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. We now have new human health thresholds on emissions like nitrous oxide that just the compressor stations alone will exceed. So they should be deemed illegal. All of these concerns were sent to the government, to province, to the different ministers making decisions, the BC Environmental Assessment Office, and none of those concerns have been addressed or responded to.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The federal government's decision to purchase Trans Mountain was driven by Kinder Morgan's decision to suspend work on the expansion project due to political and environmental opposition. The government stepped in to keep the project alive, citing its strategic importance. Let's return to the conversation with Shannon.
And when we bring it back to the money, a lot of organizations and entities around the world, because of the impacts that this industry has encouraged banks, investment firms, different investment portfolios to divest from fossil fuels. And now, because of that, because some of these projects can't get that backing or those financial guarantees, our federal government is stepping in and they're backing these projects with financial benefit. So when we ran the numbers to see how much is this going to cost taxpayers, right now we're sitting at tens of billions. That's what it's going to cost us to have these projects. We're also risking our salmon. They're going to trench through hundreds of salmon streams and tributaries, digging it up, sediment, silt erosion. We saw this with Coastal GasLink. Coastal GasLink self-reported several times, hey, DFO, we have higher than expected fish mortality rates where we're constructing the pipeline on this specific section of river. DFO didn't even go and inspect. In 5 years of that construction, after we harassed them with countless video, photos, water quality samples saying, you guys, you are the ones who are supposed to look after our fish. Why aren't you out there? And it wasn't until a local investigative journalist did a Freedom of Information request that we discovered that DFO just chose not to inspect the pipeline. They just chose that they weren't going to be a part of it. And it wasn't until they were harassed by our organization and many others that they finally did go inspect. But I think it was only once or twice. And in the end, it took them 18 months to give that ruling. The pipeline was completed in that time. So, when we talk about investment and cost, we know that this is going to cost us. We've seen this time and time again. We get promised all this stuff about a big boom, and there will be a few people who will make money, but unfortunately, the rest of us will be left with a mess. And the thing that has helped us to continue through the busts throughout the 120 years of history that my family has had here, for example, has been an intact ecosystem. Like, the vast majority of our regional economy here in the Upper Skeena is all tied to an intact ecosystem. Guide outfitting, back in the early 2000s here was rated at $28 million with $35 million in assets. Wild mushrooms in the mid-90s, just in the lower Nass, were assessed at $21 million. And we all know that the mushroom buyers are a cash economy. It's probably 10 times that. We know from back in 2006, IBM Business Consultants assessed wild salmon in the Skeena at $110 million each and every year. So every 9 years, that's $1 billion that swims to our doorsteps. Tourism in northern BC is $1 billion and growing industry. These are the things that are dependent on an intact, healthy ecosystem. We've got agriculture. We have people doing incredible things with innovative forest sectors. You know, and SWCC, our organization, we are trying to build the type of economy that culture, salmon, and climate and communities can thrive with instead of be sacrificed for. And with this industry, we're sacrificing our local economy so that Trump's biggest supporters, who are the investors in this project, the owners of this project, so that they can make the profit. So again, our public funds are being used to socialize the investment into this industry, while these Trump-backed American Wall Street MAGA corporations are the ones who are privatizing the profits. How is that elbows up? How is that in the interest of Canada? This impacts our health, our fish, our economy, and our democratic process. This is a no-brainer to most of the people who live here, and we're going to fight it. This pipeline will never be built.
Time immemorial that your people have been in the community you're at. Your ancestors kind of rising up and say, hey, you need to stand up. You need to fight for our future generations.
I think they're giving all of us an earful with a big wooden cook spoon. You know, there are probably plenty of grandmothers that are absolutely not happy. Absolutely. You know, I'm joking around, but it's so very important, and it's processes and projects like this, like the Coastal GasLink project and many others, not just in this region, that continue to break provincial law, federal law, and most importantly, Indigenous law. And you know, living in small towns and rural communities, it is quicker felt that really at the very bottom line of our daily existence, relationship dictates how much at home we can feel within our communities. And it's also really, really important to us, to Shannon, myself, and so many others that are important, that are involved in these fights, that the importance really is and has to be felt within community. There is already so much existing division that's been brought to our homes and to our lands that nobody had asked for, and that cannot drive a bigger divide into much needed unity between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, but also within those societies itself, between elected and hereditary leadership. If we're striving for better decision-making for all of us, I think unity and relationship has to be at the forefront. And as Shannon mentioned, the privatizing of the benefits is certainly a big thorn in our eye.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Last December, the Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition sent a letter to Tamara Davison, the new BC Minister of Environment, calling for greater transparency and public participation of the Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline. The letter was signed by over 90 people and organizations including First Nations, hereditary and elected governments, nonprofit organizations, ranchers, homeowners, and businesses in northern BC, as well as university professors and doctors. In this final segment of Open Connection, Shannon shares the provincial government's response.
What we need is our decision makers, our elected leaders from this government, to have the courage to come to our community and to meet with us. We have made repeated requests. This is one of the, if not the single largest infrastructure projects being built in all of Canada. We're the ones who are going to be impacted the most by it. But we get repeated responses that we do not have the capacity to travel to meet with community. That is a load of horse shit. And they need to get their asses up here, and they need to sit down with community and look them in the eye and answer the decades of questions and concerns, the reasonable questions and concerns that communities have asked. My brother has a woodlot along the pipeline right of way. They will clear 100-meter swath through, take out the trees that he generates income from. He hasn't had a single question answered. Nobody has reached out to say, hey, we're going to be in your woodlot doing vegetation surveys and rare plant studies and archaeological studies. He did get this letter. And, he's sitting there thinking, what are these guys doing? I'm going to be dropping trees, driving my skidder around there, and they're going to have people in there, doing vegetation surveys. It's all a bit satirical. Like, it feels like we're living in a Monty Python skit, because it is so ridiculous. This is going to remove a big chunk of my brother's income, and nobody's addressing his concerns. He's a business owner whose business will be drastically impacted, and they won't answer his questions. So yes, dear BC government, please come to our communities and sit down and talk with us, because we are not convinced at all that this is good for anyone, including the province, including Canada, and definitely not for the communities here. And people are rising up. There is a lot of anger, resentment, and frustration because reasonable questions have been asked and have gone unanswered for way too long. And to Minister Tamara Davidson, I think you probably want to make a better decision. I think you probably might even understand where we're coming from. So come here and sit with us and listen and see for yourself.
And Jesse?
It's really hard to follow up from that. I absolutely agree with Shannon. I think there has been a lot of voices that brought forward very informed questions, and they have been unanswered for far too long. And this community and our surrounding communities are well aware of that. And I'm waiting for the day where hereditary governance will find enough support and not be suppressed by outdated laws to insert that decision-making power. And at that point, I hope that we can turn back and have faith that there has been enough time for the people that live here to build meaningful relationships, so that, as we learned in Delgamuukw, these decisions for the betterment of all.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.